Hello everyone, here we are again, and the old whiteboard right here. That's as far over as I can get it. I think I maybe can get a little closer or whatever. It doesn't really make a difference. I just wanted you to see a few things. I want to talk about a word tonight called balance, but before I do that, we got to talk a little bit about the word dynamics. Dynamic. Which, without the S, means motion. On the piano, by dynamic, a piece being very dynamic, the notes will be all over the place. Motion. But dynamics are, believe it or not, the name of the instrument that we're talking about here. We have the piano. That's the instrument we're playing. But the original name of the instrument was actually the pianoforte, or the forte piano. It kind of gets mixed up, essentially because it was invented so that you could go from soft to louder on command, soft to louder on command. So the piano was actually invented for the concept of dynamics, and it actually bears its name. Now, what do these words mean? Well, for those that don't know, piano really just means softly, soft. And forte means, of course, loud. Now, there are degrees of all of these things. And there are many degrees softer than this and louder than that, and somewhere in the middle here. I'll give you some of the general markings that we use for this stuff. Piano is simply a little P, and forte is an F, which they write kind of fancy that way. That's the way you'll see it in the music. Now, if you want to play medium softly, we would write MP, and that word is mezzo, not mezzo, mezzo, like Mozart. Forte, which I wrote already, we have a mezzo forte, which would be, that the word means medium. And there's really a very small amount of difference between mezzo piano and forte. It's all very subjective. And so we have that. Now we can go softer than soft, and we would have these two P's here, which means, here's the long word, hope I have room, pianissimo, which means very soft. And of course in here we would have two F's, and that would be fortissimo. Okay, so we have soft to loud and loud to soft. Many times on piano, when you're asked to play very, very soft, they will implement the una corda pedal, which is the one furthest to the left, and it gives you a very almost muffled sound. One is, it's not really a soft pedal. I call it the soft pedal. It's not. It muffles it. Someday we'll talk about that pedal. But, so you have these markings. Pieces can be loud. Pieces can be soft. Okay? Like that. Pieces can be mezzo forte, mezzo piano, maybe a little less. Now, so you can have them as an absolute. Okay. But you also have changes in the dynamics. And when things go from softer to louder, you will see a symbol that looks like that. It's called a hairpin. And in this case, it's called a crescendo. It's the change that is really dramatic. Playing softly can be dramatic until it's soft for a long time, and then it loses its effect like anything else. When you see one going the other way, going this way, and it's going to be misleading up here, but I have to draw it that way. This is called the diminuendo. And the diminuendo, or decrescendo, they sometimes write decrescendo, it means get softer. Okay? And the change into getting soft. Crescendo. So, you can hear how dramatic those changes are. Then there are certain things called, there are sudden changes in the music, where you go from kind of mezzo. I'll play a piece that goes from here to here. Immediately goes from there to there. A piece called Aeolian Harp, and it goes like this. And you can hear that sudden drop. Actually, there's a crescendo at the beginning. It starts mezzo piano, mezzo forte, forte, piano, pianissimo. So that is the change of dynamics to a sudden drop, and that's very dramatic. Beethoven loved those changes. The beginning of the Fifth Symphony. All of a sudden into the soft strings and big dramatic shifts. The Third Symphony, the Eroica. Beethoven was big into all of these and the sudden changes. Okay, so we're getting towards the subject that I want to talk about. And did I bring my list? I brought my list, yes. Okay. So these are dynamics in the sense of you have a loud part, you have a soft part, you're going to get louder, you're going to get softer. But there's another word, it's not another word, it's another concept, which can happen on the piano for a trumpet player and for a violinist. Oh, by the way, the one thing the violinist can do that we can't, and a trumpet player, any other instrument, any wind or string instrument can do is, and an organ can too, a pipe organ can do it more or less, is they can play a note and make that note get louder. That way we can't do that in the piano. It's the one thing we cannot do on the piano. We have to resort to things like tremolos, which really, most of us really dislike tremolos, but to get louder. To get softer, the key will get softer. That's what happens after you hit a key. It's gonna do this. You have no choice about that. None. The bigger the piano, the longer it takes to do that, the louder it remains. On a concert grand, it's much longer than on my piano, but this is a 6-foot piano. It lasts a while. Now you notice it getting softer. Okay. So, again, these are the basic dynamics. I'm trying to think if there's any other dynamic marking. Well, yeah, if you have a note with an accent on it, like that, that's an accent. It means hit it a little harder, which will be louder. The other marking you see sometimes is this one, which is a sforzando mark, which means, I'll give you an example of a sforzando mark. Now, I went from very soft there into a section that's going to be soft. But I put one sforzando note, and that's to get kind of to wake everybody up after the soft part, but I then went right to soft. Okay? So, there are all these markings. There are more than I'm sure than this. But this is the general category. Now, here comes the thing you can't do on other. It's not that you can't do it, you don't need to do it. It's a thing called balance. On the piano, that's a big deal on the piano. And I'm going to now talk about that, and I'm going to give you examples. Balance is when, here, let me do a really bad balance. Okay, that's the Mozart Sonata. We're trying to hear through that bang, 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 bang to hear. We hear a familiar tune in there somewhere, right? Well, that's just a bad balance. I'll now play it, and I'll say a lot. I'm going to say a couple things about this. Okay, there's a balance of the right hand playing the top part is louder than the left hand, and we judge the loudness by that accompaniment. We go, oh, that's a nice soft piece. Another example would be a piece called Breakers, which actually is one of the first pieces I give students that the problem becomes even more so with, you know what, let me turn this down a little bit so you can see me playing some of these examples, all right? We'll go back like that. Yeah, because what you do to get this loudness is you have to use more weight. When you watch the Mozart, you can see I'm just using more weight on these. I'm staying very close with this hand. So that's a right and left thing. Sometimes the left hand can be the hand that you want to accent. There's a piece that the kids do called Amazing Grace. You know Amazing Grace. But it was arranged so that at one part you're playing the tune in the left hand. So more weight down here. So again, it could be either hand, but I'm going to show you examples that are a little tougher because they they don't use just one hand. They use both hands for everything. So, and there's a lot of examples of that actually, and we have to look into that. But it is a more weight thing. See, in a piece like this, you don't have to worry about balance. Everybody's kind of working on that one guy, get a little louder, get a little softer. But then you get the stuff where the balance is a really important part of what's going on. And I've given you a couple examples of that. Sometimes a hand is over another hand. Rhapsody in Blue, for example. He plays this. But you want probably the reason people do that is the right hand is often relegated the melody and plays louder. The left hand, the accompaniment. So by switching them, it's a natural thing to play the right hand louder. So as I showed you before, I told you I had kind of a interesting way with the pedal of playing this. You can see my left hand. I'm really giving these guys a shot down here. Not real loud, but enough to... This guy I'm staying very close. Okay, so those are examples of where you have a loud hand and a soft hand. But how about an example where they have to constantly switch the responsibility of who's loud and who's soft? That's when it gets dicey. So I'll give you an example of a piece, as I was going to say before. It is one I give kids about the grade 2 level. And they get it pretty quick because it's really a listening thing and giving the command to the hands as to what to do. But if you practice it right, the hands will do it. You have a melody here. Let me show you the music. And you have an accompaniment. Now, let me play the melody the way you actually play that melody. Let me show you. Now, you're probably wondering why you're changing hands during that. Well, when I add this to it, And that, bring that around a little further so you can see better. You will see why I'm doing that. Now I'll play the notes with no different loudnesses. I'll play them all about the same loudness. Okay? Now the problem with playing that way is the listening audience is going to go, now what is the tune there? Is that part of the tune? That is that, you know, where's the tune? Well, that's what we have to do. We have to show them that. So when my hands are both, whichever hand is up here is going to be using more weight, and you'll see it coming a little bit more off the keys, or a little bit more wrist motion here. On these guys, you'll see kind of a flat look. But watch why this becomes difficult. And that's the hard part of the piece to teach. It's not, it's more challenging than teaching the kids to do this with the hands, is getting them to do the loudnesses correctly. So, you can see both hands are doing the melody, both hands are doing the accompaniment. We have the meter. We got to be careful to make it ba da 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 da, where you can hear the groups of three. But you've got groups of three down here too, but they're all at different levels of general loudness. Remember, the accent values have to do with relative loudness. Here you have absolute loudnesses. The right hand is going to be louder, the upper part is going to be louder than the bottom parts. So that's when it can get really difficult. There's a piece called Reverie by Tchaikovsky, and when you listen to it, it's right and left hand, but here it switches in the middle, where you're going from the tenor part then all of a sudden that soprano comes racing in on top of that tenor part. But the difficulty there is playing the middle, this part quiet, because your left hand is still playing the tenor part. So now you've got three levels to contend with besides just the accent values. You've got to get this guy prominent and make him a little less prominent while you got this accompaniment in the middle. And this is when the piano gets really sophisticated with these dynamics. Yeah, so anyway, I was thinking of the next part, which does exactly that. Then and you can hear that Tchaikovsky's got this little extra lines everywhere. They can't be predominant over the melody, but they have to be predominant over the other parts of the accompaniment. And you can see, bring that out. You don't want, which is what some kids do. You need it to be, but you've got the top part, so that can get really involved. Let's just say that. So anyway, that's this is the concept behind balance in general. Big, important word, and something you always have to be aware of. Even when you're playing a chord, if you can do the chord so that that top note, since it's the melody, instead of where you don't really hear that note, that's a tricky proposition where that happens. But it's what I call, as a composer, I call it the focal point. the focal point has always got to be, you're playing a lot of notes. One of those notes is going to be what the folks should be listening to. We'll call it the lead note, the one that the singer's singing. It's the guy with the guitar singing, and you want to hear him and the guitar in the background. So that's what the balance is, making the focal point obvious. So anyway, I hope, again, it's been enlightening, and you remember this thing. None of these things are separate from each other. They're all at work all the time. All the techniques we talked about, I was using. The drop, the free fall, the thrust, staccato, maybe even some staccato in there too. Yeah, those end notes were kind of staccato. Those are always at work. Rotations are always at work. But right now we were focusing tonight on this loudness business. Okay, so Sunday night, have a good night, and Monday is tomorrow, and we'll do another one then. Okay, so remember, when words fail, music speaks.